That was probably what gave me my longevity in the game. Not being the flashiest guy, but one of the hardest workers. I was the guy willing to do the hard yards and put my head in dark places and do the stuff that typically most people wouldn't want to do. I'm out doing what I'm doing to my body, and I know there's a lot of people out there going, you're silly, you're crazy, give it a risk. Just being in the pain cave so much to kind of go about my day-to-day stuff. I need to have a little window where I am in the red. I was really just trying to figure out how I could bring the team together as best as I could, as fast as I could. And that was ultimately going to be around the culture. What else can I do in order to get them to decide themselves that, okay, a little bit of hurt is actually good for them? Success was inspiring the next young Indian boy or girl to pick up a rugby board and play rugby. We've got an opportunity here to create a bit of history.
My name is Kyla Colbin. You're listening to my interview with DJ Forbes, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to episode 24 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. My guest today is DJ Forbes. DJ is Rugby Sevens royalty. He played in 512 games in 89 tournaments. He won 6 World Series. Last year, he was inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame. In this conversation, we talk about coming to grips with his identity as a Samoan, as the captain of his nation, and now as a coach. So here you are, my conversation with DJ Forbes. Can you tell me a little bit about 3 years old, starting running around? Tell me about how you got started in sport.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I was probably your classic kid growing up, eating my Weet-Bix, wanting to, be like an All Black. So, we chucked the ball around and just stuff in the backyard. From as young as I can remember, I got pictures of me kind of with a spade digging into scoria with Dad, and I could. The spade was almost twice the length of me, so definitely was an active child growing up. And then I'm sure we'll touch on it a bit later, but fell in love with rugby down the track.
And did you get started? My understanding is you got started with rugby union.
Rugby league. Yeah, so there were a few of us sort of cousins growing up, and we had one of those uncles in the family that was proud and loud about his rugby league team, and that was called Marist Saints Rugby League. And so from under fives, I played for Marist Rugby League until about, I think, under maybe 13s, and then started jumping between rugby league and rugby union at school, and then I guess long story short, converted sort of officially to rugby union in my last year of Kelston. I was playing for the first 13 team rugby league, and then the first 15 coach mentioned that the first 15 team was going to South Africa next year for a tour, and if I wanted to travel, I should learn how to play rugby. So I decided to jump codes that year.
Amazing. And so did you get to go to South Africa?
Yeah, I made the team. Lucky, because we did a lot of early morning trainings. And it was probably my first taste, really, of what the next sort of level of rugby was going to look like in terms of getting up early, early morning trainings, going up against my mates and, 40 or 50 odd boys at the time, running around the track and, doing what was required in order to even get half a chance. And then obviously went through, the trials and whatnot, and ended up making that cast of first 15 a little while ago.
Can I just say, how cool is it that was it your coach who said, if you want to go to South Africa, this is what you need to do? What a cool carrot to dangle in front of a young man to go, hey, look at what is possible for you if you get your act together. And at that moment, he wasn't going, you could win gold, you could represent New Zealand, you could do all these other things. He's going, you could just go on a cool trip and see the world a little bit. And that's enough to get you started.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. I mean, and I'm pretty sure for at least another, I don't know, 3 or 4 years after school, it was all about that. It was about, having a bit of fun, a bit of travel, hanging out with my mates and all that kind of jazz. So yeah, the carrot was definitely dangled in front of my face, and I love rugby league, and there was still a little part of me, post, I guess, my union career that sort of wonders, oh, what would have happened if I stayed in rugby league. But in terms of, I guess, yeah, what I've managed to achieve and places I've been and what I've seen, and some of the, I guess, the life lessons and life friends I've made along the way in rugby union and rugby sevens in particular has been a pretty special part of my life.
Can we go back? You mentioned your uncle, Maris. Was that your famous uncle? Which uncle
Well,
was that?
he was
Tell me
one of
about your uncle.
one of the famous uncles. No, so this one was Uncle Su'a, who passed away as well. But he was, yeah, one of the older brothers of my mum's very big family of siblings. And obviously, yeah, he got us into or encouraged us to play rugby league. He also, I don't know, you've probably done a bit of research and found out that I did a bit of Samoan cultural dance back in the days, which was called fire dance or the siva afi. So he was the uncle that taught me that side and probably really kept me pretty close to my Samoan culture. And then obviously, yeah, the late Peter Fats was probably where I get most of my rugby pedigree. And I say this respectfully in front of my parents. Like my dad's a pretty awesome darts player. My mum was a pretty confident darts slash snooker player. So in terms of rugby and else, I was probably left to my own devices for a little bit, and obviously lent on my uncles and obviously my cousins, throughout my kind of growing up to learn my trade.
I'm really interested in this concept of like, how do we start to explore a sport and how do we start to see our self-identity in it? And I heard you in a different interview, I heard you say that your parents were pretty much like, whatever you want to do, DJ, like we support you. And I heard you say you got a little more pressure maybe from your uncle. What was that pressure like? What form did it take?
Oh, I think it was more just the opportunity is there, and you got to go and chase it.
Mm.
And especially for him, probably did a lot of his achievements the hard way, and I guess ultimately when he got to play for Manu Samoa, you could see, I guess, the pride and passion that he had and the legacy that he left behind in terms of what he achieved in that space. And so he really kind of opened the door for me. Because, like I said, a lot of my early um, playing was really just hanging out with my mates and having a bit of fun. And all the boys loved playing whatever code, whether it was rugby, league, sevens. We all did it. We hung out, had a few beers after it, and then we carried on with things. But he obviously saw something in me, and saw that there was a chance to, I guess, pursue maybe a professional, or what it was back then, a semi-professional career. So he kind of gave me my first opportunities. Like he took me on a couple of rep trips for Auckland, Samoa, and then obviously he did a little stint down in King Country, which he managed to go down there with a bunch of Aucklanders down in the King Country to try and revive their achievements, and we managed to do that. But there was some tough learnings along the way, and I was just playing for petrol vouchers, and those got spent on bags of chips and biscuits and things on the way home. So yeah, it was.
Can you tell me? I don't know this story. What is King Country and what were you trying to revive?
Oh, so yeah, it was like in terms of the different divisions in provincial rugby,
Mhm.
one of the lower divisions where you would probably call it like Heartland Rugby, and basically they hadn't won a game in a couple of years, and so he got a coaching opportunity, and was I guess given sort of full reign in terms of how he was going to go about achieving his goal as a coach. And so he took a few of the Auckland club players down there. We played club down in King Country, and obviously made the representative side, and played some Heartland Rugby and managed to get a few wins on the board, and I think lost in the semis, but achieved some good things, and it was a real good time playing in a small provincial union like that, our real grassroots stuff. So that brought us quite close in terms of that connection, me being a nephew just sort of tagging along, doing whatever uncle said, and then that kind of extended into sort of higher honors as we sort of moved on with life.
What was he like as a coach?
Yeah, well, I guess wore his heart on the sleeve, very passionate, and a lot of, I guess, the traditional kind of doing the hard work and putting your head in dark places, and that's where you sort of you find your worth. I was a forward, and obviously him being a proud prop, he's always been his head in the dark place. So I think just for me, one of the things I really wanted to do as a half Samoan, or a lighter shade of brown Samoan, was to prove to him that I was just as proud to be a Samoan, and I could tackle and run as hard as a Samoan, as well as being a proud Kiwi.
What is this Samoan thing is obviously, sorry, I feel like that sounded really dismissive as it came out of my mouth. I didn't mean it dismissive in any way. Obviously, your Samoan identity is massively important to you. I've heard you talk about the traditional dance, well, the contemporary version of the traditional dance. I've heard you talk about this part of your identity and being as proud of that. I heard you in a separate context on a different video. I heard you talk about a bit of a struggle with, am I Samoan enough? What's that journey? What's that journey that you go on?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably quite common for a lot of Kiwi-born Samoans, or half-caste Samoans. I know a long time ago, you'd go to the islands and you probably were looked down upon a little bit. Are you Samoan enough, or what we used to call back in the day as being plastic. So not really knowing your culture or your heritage and things like that. So I think for me, I wear that part of my culture like literally on my sleeve. I've got a Samoan cultural tattoo, and like I say, when I was at school, I was in the Samoan group, and really just wanted to prove, and probably, unfortunately, I proved to others that I was proud to be Samoan, when at the end of the day, it was really just making sure that I was proud of who I was, and that I could, I needed to be as Samoan as I needed to be. I didn't need to be Samoan for anyone else. So, I was coming to sort of grips with that probably a bit more later in life, but definitely through those younger years, I guess hanging alongside, Uncle Peter and what he was doing sort of in the Samoan community, that sort of gave me a little foot in the door. But I guess as an individual, I wanted to achieve a little bit of my own status and prove that I was, a proud Samoan as well.
What does it mean to be Samoan?
Oh, I mean, I think everyone's interpretation would definitely be different. I think for me, it's just being proud of who you are and the culture you come from. I guess typically we're from quite humble beginnings, and when I think of my parents, my mum and my dad, they probably sit on opposite sides of the spectrum. My mum's the loud, proud Samoan, and my dad's the quiet, diligent Kiwi. And I think I've got a nice blend of that when it comes to how I go about especially my footy, but probably more so now, and on the other side of the coin, in I guess my career after sport, I believe sort of in terms when it comes to leadership, I'm a servant leader, which is ideally my cultural side. We typically, we're taught to sit at the back, and be asked to come to the front rather than sitting at the front and getting told get to the back. And then obviously with my dad just being a hard, diligent, Kiwi working man, that's where I'm happy to just do what I need to do when I was playing rugby, or whether it's in work in terms of just going about my work day to day. Whether it is by myself or with a team, I'm quite disciplined in that sense to get what I need to get done in order to achieve what I need to achieve.
I've heard this come through over and over again in the stories I've heard you tell, and the way I've heard you speak, and the way I've heard others speak about you, is that you're going to do the work. No one's going to get in your way from doing the work that you need to do to show up. Like you might win or lose the game, but it won't be for lack of you putting in the hard yards.
Yeah, well, I guess that was one of the key attributes, and it's interesting because I definitely wouldn't have said that of me growing up, and it definitely wasn't through my teens, and it would have only been I guess when I got a taste of potentially what could come of a career in footy, and I guess the penny kind of dropped around my first year of like somewhat representative rugby. Eric Rush saw me at a tournament, and they managed to get a trial for Auckland. And I guess a long story short, through that Auckland era, We went down to what was called the Nationals back then and played Nationals, and we won the Nationals. And off the back of that, I got invited to a New Zealand Sevens camp, and I guess the rest is history after that. But those were the kind of things where for a long time I was sort of just cruising along, doing what I could when I could. But it wasn't until then when I saw far out there's a chance here that I could potentially make something of this, and probably to see what I did from that day on compared to how I was going about my day-to-day stuff was definitely a defining moment, and probably like to this day, based on what you've heard and you hear about other people talking about me, definitely a hard working person, and kind of that cliche saying around hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And so that's sort of me, not being probably the flashiest guy on the team, but definitely one of the hardest workers, and that was probably what gave me the majority of my longevity in the game, because I was the guy willing to do the hard yards and probably put my head in dark places and do the stuff that typically most people wouldn't want to do. But I knew that was a part of, I guess, the team that was needed in order to get some success.
One of the things that's come through so consistently on this podcast, and just last week, our episode was with Raylene Castle, the chief executive of Sport New Zealand, and she talks about how you spend a lot of time in the pain cave. If you want to be an elite athlete, there's just no kind of avoiding that. And that's what I'm hearing you talk about is, this just acceptance of like the pain cave is just a place that you have to go to achieve at the kind of level that you've achieved at. That's just part of the package. Fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. And I guess, I've made up a quote probably about a year ago that I'd rather search for hurt than wait for it to find me. And that's kind of like, there's a lot of people that'll be out there and you sort of wait, or you're thinking, oh, I'll do it later, or I'll start later. But sometimes you just got to embrace it. And that's, I think, in those moments, where you actually learn the most about yourself. And so when I'm out doing what I'm doing to my body, and I know there's a lot of people out there going, oh, you're silly, you're crazy, give it a rest kind of thing. A lot of it's based on, how I'm wired now, and that's been ingrained, whether good or bad, from my playing days under Titch. And like you say, just being in the pain cave so much, that now, in order to kind of go about my day-to-day stuff, I need to have a little window where, I am in the red. And so right now, CrossFit gives me that sort of fix where I can turn up to the gym, my gym, the Hybrid Formula, and just do what's on the board, operate in the red, or jump into the trenches, and I feel good. Physically, I feel like wrecked, because I've still got injuries and stuff from footy and dealing with all that kind of stuff. But mentally, it puts me in a good place for the day to go about what I need to do. So yes, I know in terms of high performance sport, there's definitely that conversation. But I know that that dynamic is definitely changing. What I went through in terms of what was the pain cave is a lot different these days, for this generation, and I'm sure you've heard many times with the people you've spoken to. So that's an interesting dynamic now.
We are going to dig so deep into that. That is where I have so much curiosity coming out of that. But you just mentioned the magic word, which is Titch. Gordon Titchens, legendary coach, massive sustained success, by all accounts, incredible hard case.
Yeah.
From the outside, hearing the stories, possibly a bit of a jerk. Your take?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely a hard taskmaster, I'll put it that way. He wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea. And like I say, in terms of the generational changes and the athletes that we're dealing with, and the way athletes are wired, there'll definitely be certain moments and times and trainings and whatnot that wouldn't be suitable or fitted for this generation. And I guess I always refer to myself as like a young Generation X. So when it was yes sir or no sir, I was happy with that, and it taught me a lot of good skills, a lot of resilience, a lot of attributes that I'm grateful for now in terms of being able to I guess stay in the hurt or stay in the trenches that people refer to, against when the body's sort of screaming for help. But then, in saying that, there'll be, a lot of athletes that, would simply say no or wouldn't be motivated by that type of coaching. And I guess that's the hardest thing for coaches these days, as well as athletes, to find that where's that sweet spot where, the pain cave and how we go about getting to that point. And, whether you jump in freely or not is kind of, that part and parcel of it.
This is the thing that I'm so curious about because, as we've already talked about here, and as this come up over and over again, in order to achieve, extraordinary outcomes, you have to be willing to go to places that other people are not willing to go. And to do that, typically you're going to have a coach who is going to invite you to those places. And so this thing of going, okay, well, I've got a coach who's going to invite me to those places. And how do I do that in such a way where it is about creating the opportunity for you to express yourself rather than punishing you or forcing you or bullying you? Like that's, and you obviously, and partially maybe out of a result of the experiences that you've had, you've studied this, right? Masters of Professional Practice and the athlete-coach relationship. How do we navigate that tension of, I see the potential in you to do great things, and I'm going to hold you to those standards in such a way that I'm also wrapping a little bit of love and care around your spirit? How do we do that?
Well, I guess, it's probably ultimately what your podcast is about, like that whole, well, in terms of that reference, like empathy over ambition. And that's probably the key learning for me, definitely, being on one side of the coin as an athlete, going through an experience, not just Titch, but many coaches, many elite coaches, and then stepping into, I guess, this side, whether it's in this, management and administration role in sport or as a coach, where I've had to navigate that. And I know that as much as, like you say, I could see, man, these kids, these athletes, they just need hard work. It's being able to pull back on that thought and say, oh, actually, that's using empathy to go, okay, hold on, what else can I do in order to get them to, like you say, decide themselves that, okay, a little bit of hurt is actually good for them. But still, keeping them connected to the purpose, rather than saying do this because, or do this or else. I think just for me, it's getting an appreciation of that. And I'm sort of dealing with now, like international athletes. I was in India not too long ago, coaching in a new sevens competition there, right down to my daughter's team under 12s, under 13s. So it's been really interesting, but I'm glad that I've gone through different stages and I've been able to sort of see it all from within as well as from outside the box as well. So some really good learnings.
I've got a hypothesis, which I've had for a while, but is consistent with what you've just been describing in terms of your own journey, which is that for young people, the aim of sports should be enjoyment. And that when you're young, get out, enjoy it, screw it up, run in the wrong direction, run around the back of the thing, whatever, it doesn't matter, just to be out there, to enjoy it, to have the lived experience of being able to physically express yourself through the medium of this particular sport. And then through that enjoyment, we get to a point, is what I heard you say, get to a point of going, okay, I enjoy this enough that actually I might want to get a little more serious about it, a little more structured, a little more technical, tactical. And that going through that route versus going through a route of, from the age of 5 or the age of 3, you are going to be a professional ballerina or a golfer or a rugby player or whatever it is, and you cannot do anything else. And therefore, there's a piece there of like, you could probably win either way. And in one of these ways, you win with your soul intact.
Yeah. And
in another way, you win broken. That's my hypothesis. I'm open for challenge.
It's a good one. And I think, when I've sat down and I've thought about it, like the perfect kind of example is, of when me and my wife had kids, there was a part of me that was like, okay, so when they're young enough to exercise or to train, that's, I'll walk alongside them from under fives till when they say that, Dad, go, leave me alone, kind of thing, and we'll do it that way. Whatever they do, we'll get them training and all that kind of jazz. So when it comes to that next level, they'll be ready, whatever sport it is. It wasn't about the sport, it was more about, from a young age, just sort of training them up. And then there was the other side of us going, no, just let them just, go off the flow, whatever happens. And, when the time's right, they'll find their way and da 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 da. So to fast forward to where we are now, yep, we went with the, okay, just let our kids navigate their way, do what they want, find their own path. My girl decided a year ago to ask Dad, to help her with rugby. She wanted to get into rugby. So, okay, cool. I'm gonna
go, girl.
Yeah, I'm gonna help you, and
get it.
That's the tick of approval that I can step in and help. But then you sort of get into a year now. She's at Ames Games currently, and their team, Glenelg Intermediate. Quick little shout out, they're doing really well.
Amazing.
But there's a part of me going, man, if we started training like 5 years ago, imagine what it would be like. That's imagine. Who knows? Like you say. And then there's the other side where my boy Titus, he's a little bit older, 3 years older. He's turning 16. He's been cruising, dabbles in basketball. But there's a side of me now going, okay, I've let him do his own thing. Now it's more about just being active and putting some time into exercise and whatever it is. So now I'm like, okay, we need to put you into like a gym or somewhere where you can do an activity. And so he's brought into that, which is cool. But then again, there's a part of me going, oh, did I miss the boat? Should I have been training him like from at least 10, rather than now? But I guess the ultimatum I kind of gave him in a nice way was like, if you find a school sport or a club sport, whatever it is, then fine, I'll leave it, and you can carry on doing whatever you're doing. But until then, we'll just do some training together, whether it's in the garage, we'll go for a run together, and so like you say, your hypothesis is good, but it's kind of like it still paints that, hindsight, you're like sitting there going, oh, shouldn't I have? But, when I look at them both now, I'm happy where they're at, regardless, and they're both chipping away. They've both gone different ways about it. Us as parents have sort of let them flow. And I guess the only real, kind of reflection I can give on that is that my parents, like I say, a darts player and a snooker player, they did not push me at all into any sport. They just let me do my thing. I found the sport at a later age, and here we are talking about it. But it's two sides of the spectrum to be considered for sure.
I mean, what you're describing is the agony of parenting.
Yep, 100%.
Should I not? Should I push them? Should I let them go? Do I let them explore? Do I encourage them? Do I set constraint? Every parent listening, I am sure, suffers from this. And I will just say, as someone who doesn't know you or your kids, sounds like you're doing a great job. And I'll tell you the evidence that I'm using to make that claim, because I'm not just saying that to butter you up. The evidence that I'm using to make that claim is your children going, I would like to do this. I would like to. And I feel as parents, I have 3 stepsons, similar age to I've got a 17-year-old stepson, a 15-year-old. I think you have a 15-year-old maybe, and a 12-year-old. And so I'm seeing this in like really, again, my hypothesis, my personal belief is that our aim as parents is to support our children to grow into their own self-leadership of like, this is who I want to be. This is the life I want to have. And we've got to put a bunch of constraints around them. We got to go, okay, you have to move your body. I don't care what you do. I'll support you whatever you want to do. Let's make it fun. You pick something else at school, that's fine. But if you're not going to do anything, here's what we're going to do. This is the baseline. You have to move your body because this is an important thing that you might not get to on your own, because kids don't know, what they don't know. But that thing of being able to go, you get the choice to go, how do I want to express myself in the requirement of moving my body? How do I want to do that? Sounds like your kids are doing great.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's been an interesting and a cool journey. Like, And respectfully, I've got friends that have trained their kids in whatever sport, and they're doing awesome as well.
Yes.
And that's probably painting the contrast for me. But I think, yeah, like you say, it's one of those things where knowing that they're in a position where they've both sort of chosen and are navigating in a safe space. And dad and mum are just sort of waiting there to say, if you need any guidance or any help, obviously with my girl, in terms of the footy stuff, yeah, I can jump in behind that. And when my boy was obviously starting to get into basketball, I didn't have any idea around basketball, but I did have a fair idea around fitness and how to be competitive and all that kind of stuff. So I could easily help in that space. But he's still sort of navigating, I think what he's going to do in terms of activity. And he's a big boy. He's getting close to my height, and he's filling out really well. So I just want to make sure that he has an opportunity in the school years at least to use that body for some good.
How old is he now?
So he's so 12 and 15. So my 12-year-old girl,
Yeah,
15-year-old boy, they're both turning 13 and 16 in September, or in a couple of weeks.
yeah, nice. And then you've been coaching in Hyderabad.
Yeah.
And what do you see as the differences between coaching at that level versus coaching like the kids?
Yeah, well, I think that was really sort of testing the waters for me in terms of that international caliber. There were a few players there that obviously I had played against still, and then obviously some that I'd been involved with in different circles, and then obviously new faces that I've never engaged with. So I think first and foremost the difference between open ears and willingness to learn compared to, I guess, new ideas. And that's probably the difference. At the younger age, the kids are wanting to learn as much as they can. So you're basically giving them a buffet of things to learn or to identify and to understand. Whereas at the international level, it was more about what other ideas can I put in front of these elite athletes, to kind of grow their learning, but also we had a small window, which was basically 2 weeks to build a campaign. So to bring, international players from basically around the world, in 2 weeks, to put together a campaign to go against some of the best in the world. So, there was a whole other element to that type of coaching compared to what I've been sort of doing currently.
How do you go about that? You've got 2 weeks. Like, how do you, there's that norming, forming, storming, performing, norming, storming, the team building process.
Yep.
How do you go about that in such a condensed period of time to perform at such a high level?
Yeah, well, I think for me, that was kind of a good opportunity to test some of my learnings, and obviously from like what I studied, and really it was about building the culture, because I knew that these athletes could play 100%. They could all, they were superstars in their own right. And I was really just trying to figure out how I could bring the team together as best as I could, as fast as I could. And that was ultimately going to be around, the culture. It wasn't going to be about trying to show them new game plans and, any new tricks, because basically everything that's out there is out there. And, you could innovate and come up with, slight tweaks on game plans. But at the end of the day, it's still an oval ball that, everyone's trying to chase around. So yeah, for me in particular, and I'm a big believer in culture. A lot of the high performing teams I've dealt with, whether it's been as an organization or in the team as an athlete, has been a result of in high performing culture. So that was probably the key thing for me, was how I was going to bring them together. So put together a campaign, and I've got like a little acronym. When I do a lot of keynote speaking and whatnot, I'm a big believer in acronyms. I mean, you've probably seen that, or you probably heard it in a couple of the articles you may have read. But so I wanted to build a brave culture. So what does a brave culture look like? That's behaviors, relationships, attitude, or what I would call AQ, around just adaptability and the growth mindset, values, and the environment. So if I could tick off those attributes along the way in those 2 weeks, then I would, I was going to be pretty confident of what we could do. And it was actually, very interesting. The team was really successful in terms of like the pool play. We out of 10 games, we went 9 out of 10 games. And by the end of the pool play, around the 2 round robins, everyone was saying like we're the team to beat kind of thing. Obviously tripped up in our semi-final, unfortunately. But what I saw in that short amount of time was just a bunch of men from around the globe that had come together really quick, that just enjoyed each other's company. So when it came to time to work hard and to jump in the pain cave and things like that, they were willing to do that, and we gelled really, really well. And the team had a real good buzz, and it was just really good to see. Again, unfortunate or bittersweet, whatever you want to call it, but I know that sevens. You could be on top of the world one day and lose it the next. So finishing up third was still I think a pretty good achievement, and the boys formed some pretty tight bonds that I think will go a long way.
It's an amazing achievement. Was this your first time coaching at that level?
At that level, I've done sort of spot coaching with school teams and a couple sort of invitational teams, and then like I say, when I was coaching post retiring, I was helping a couple of different countries, or doing sort of workshops and clinics. But yeah, I think at that level, that was probably the highest in terms of that pedigree.
Okay, so brave culture. Culture's huge. Culture consistent across the board. High performing teams. I heard you say these men came from around the world. They really enjoyed each other's company. That connection that they formed, those bonds they formed, were what allowed them to have each other's back when they were having to dig deep and go into that pain cave. I know there are going to be so many folks listening to this going, but how? Like, what did you do? We walk in and you're like, we're going to be brave. And everyone's like, yay, we're brave. And now we're bonded. Like, how does it work?
Yeah, well, so we had to build the campaign around something that they were going to buy into. So I guess when I found out that, I was selected by Hyderabad, then we were called the Hyderabad Heroes. So I had to theme up our campaign. So we were going to be like superheroes. So it was a superhero theme. Had to obviously go back to how we would link the team to Hyderabad as a city and what they were about, and it was basically a melting pot of cultures, and so I was basically kind of giving them that picture of 12, 13, 14 superheroes coming together, and how we were going to go about our day-to-day kind of work. And so we were literally like, in terms of the media and the socials, everyone was given a superhero, and they were AI transformed and whatnot. And our maps or game plan in terms of, how we sort of structured what we're going to do on attack and indeed, I themed that all around, superhero names. And that kind of, I think, brought us in terms of, let's be heroes. But the hero link was back to what we were ultimately trying to do as part of the wider organization, GMR, in terms of what they were trying to do for Indian rugby, and that's inspire, the next generation. So basically saying to them that, we've got an opportunity here to create a bit of history. You're going to go back, to your different countries, and hopefully in like 5 or 10 years time, you're going to have kids talking about, a new rugby sevens league in India that you were a part of. And that you started that. So little things like that, trying to create some real, and I know organizations, they talk about it like that authentic buy-in, and making sure you can get people, along for the ride. That was a real key part, but, finding ways to connect. So it wasn't just all rugby, we'll spend some time together, go walking through the markets, embrace the culture, and, getting the boys to, to mix and mingle and, to learn the Indian culture. Because that was ultimately what we were there to do. So we had a big portion of the team that were the local Indians, but also how could I tie in all the different cultures that everyone else was bringing from from their country. So it was one of those things where it definitely wasn't created just purely on the field. We did some hard trainings to kind of test where everyone was at, but like I said, a lot of it was done off the field, finding that real authentic buy-in that the players were going to, look forward to as well as, giving them a little bit more than, success in terms of winning the tournament. Success was, inspiring, the next young Indian boy or girl to pick up a rugby ball and play rugby.
Did you experience that kind of, like, what I'm hearing you say is you went to this team, you've got 2 weeks to build this campaign, and so you are intentionally and deliberately investing in, how am I going to bring these people together to accomplish something greater as a collective than what they can do on their own, and to see themselves as part of this bigger story. Was that your experience when you were a player? Did your coaches elicit that in your team? Did you see yourself as part of this bigger story? Or is this something that evolved in your approach to thinking about how you might go about your work?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing, not just for the 17, but it probably started more so from the All Blacks, team, in terms of their culture and the legacy that the black jersey holds. And so we knew coming into our environment, of the legacy of the black jersey. So that was the kind of the buy-in about wanting to, do our best, but ultimately leave the jersey in a better place for the next athlete coming through. And I guess where we kind of got a little bit lost in that transition piece was, we saw what other teams and other players had achieved before us. And there might have been that initial kind of, okay, we need to do what they did kind of thing. I guess where that dynamic changed and similar to the All Blacks 15s team was when the coaches actually started letting the players lead the team and drive a lot of the, how we're going to operate. And that's probably when we managed to sort of, get a lot more buy-in in terms of the culture. I think when I went in, there might have been 2 players, senior players from the previous team, whereas the rest were wiped out, and we were a bunch of new kids on the block. So we didn't know any better, but we managed to have a year of learnings. And then after that year, we kind of found our feet. There were some leaders that got to kind of drive the team, as well as build the culture. And then through that phase where we had a little bit of dominance, we kind of, created a culture that demanded certain standards. And that kind of, I guess, lifted the performance along the way.
This thing of player-led culture is huge. It's huge in the work that I don't know if you know this, but my company BOMA, we partnered with the Crusaders to create a program called the Crusaders Leadership Programme. And we talk with Wayne Smith and Robbie Deans and Kieran Read and Sam Whitelock and Scott Robertson, and the player-driven culture is massive. And I know that when I talk to people outside of this world, it's like everybody wants, of course, we all want our players, our employees, our team to pick it up and, hold themselves to account. And most people in most environments, I would argue, would say either it's not that easy, or how do you transfer that ownership and get them to accept it?
I guess that's the hardest part in terms of definitely that I've seen stepping into this site or into this space where typically in a team environment, you've got your goal. This is where we're heading, so everyone jump on board and let's go in that direction. Where there's a few more different dynamics and things to deal with on this side. And sometimes I get quite frustrated because you're sort of dealing with different stakeholders, and you're wondering are we all just trying to help the same people here? It's and you kind of hope, or I hope, I wish I put the athlete head back on. I think it should be a lot easier than this. We all want to head in the same direction. But I think getting an understanding for that and a real appreciation of it, that is the faster we can sort of understand that, I guess, that that process, and the more sort of open we are to it all, I think then you start sort of noticing a few more runs on the board and a bit more understanding and appreciation for what it truly is. But it's one of those dynamics that to this day is probably one of the hardest things to navigate. And some people might say it's easy to say it, but it's not actually. But I think it definitely is a lot more prominent now. and there's a lot more, I guess, openness to it. And the ones that obviously get it right, there is that kind of genuine buy-in, but it's from the bottom up and the top down. Because it's one thing saying, yeah, we want, especially in the organization I'm in now, we can talk about athlete voice, and you can say that athletes are asking for athlete voice, and we can do all we can to promote and enhance athlete voice. But at the end of the day, there still has to be some accountability and skin in the game from the actual athletes. So it's one thing that, because I know when I was an athlete, you sort of, if you want to say things and voice up with things, that's all good. But then there's a time when you actually need to put some skin in the game, and you actually need to be in the forefront of it in terms of engagement and and all that kind of jazz. So it's
Can you give me an example? What do you mean by athlete voice versus skin in the game? Like what
also,
do you
like, we can, as an organization, we could say, well, here, we want to enhance athlete voice, and we could go out to our stakeholders, the athletes, and say, what do you guys want? And they say, we want to be able to voice up, and we want to be at the table. We want to have, consultation. We want to be, having the dialogue. But then I guess when we get those opportunities, if we put out a document for feedback, are they engaged as, what they were voicing in the first instance? And then you sort of giving these, athletes opportunities. I think they just have to kind of appreciate that when there's opportunities to engage, they need to really jump into that space and to use those opportunities to voice up, to to have their say, to create some engagement, to start that whole feedback loop process, rather than it could be all we all sitting around the table saying, yeah, we want athlete voice, we want to engage with stakeholders when we get the opportunity. But then it's like it says, it's not that easy, because then when we do get the opportunity, and if we put out a survey, or if we put out a document for feedback and engagement, you're not going to get out of 100 responses, you're not always going to get 100 responses. So it's trying to find ways to ensure and like really encourage athletes that when there are these opportunities for engagement, like, everyone needs to come to the table.
Do you know what you're talking about? What it reminds me of? So I ran our local TEDx event for 10 years, and we had a guy called Raf Manji speak at our event one year, and he was talking about universal basic income. And there had been a lot of talks on the TEDx network about universal basic income, and mostly just advocating for it. What Raf was saying was universal basic income is a fantastic idea, and here's 2,500 years of people talking about it and how good it is. And what we don't talk about often enough in conjunction with it is, what are our responsibilities as citizens? And so he was talking about this in more kind of general civic terms, but this premise, I'm drawing a little bit of a connection here with what you're talking about, this premise of going as an athlete, as a team member, as an employee, as a partner, as a parent, as a kid, as a human being, taking ownership of, here is how I am going to show up and how I'm willing to show up and what is my accountability. And when I'm asking for things from the perspective of, I am going to show up and do my part. Here's what I need from you in order for me to perform at my best. Like, there's a much more kind of equality, or two equals kind of coming together, versus I need more money or time off or whatever, and we're not going to talk about how I show up and what I bring to the table.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's kind of part of our work now, is like, currently there's, obviously we're trying to connect with as many of our member federations as possible, in terms of just ensuring that, one, they have an athlete voice mechanism of whatever sort. So, it might be.
Can you just quickly, give us the overview of Athlete Leaders Network, so people listening understand what the organization is?
Yeah, so we're just an athlete-led organization like that's here to really enhance athlete voice across the high performance sector. But when I say high performance, it's across as many member federations across Olympic, Paralympic, and Commonwealth sports.
And esports, I saw even on your website.
Sports is one of them, yeah.
And freestyle scootering was the other one that I was like, this is amazing.
We're connecting with as many of them, as we can, and really it's to enhance, the manner of athlete voice, and that's like through different hours, whether it's leadership, education, and well-being support. And so across those member federations that we do engage with, one kind of area that we are diving a lot deeper into right now is the athlete voice mechanism. So, and when I say athlete voice mechanism, or AVM, that could be an athletes commission, an athlete leadership group, whatever. But we just want to make sure that as many of these member federations have an operating AVM, and then ultimately an effective one. And so we're not saying that we're setting standards, or that they need to be doing this, but what we are trying to do is, one, ensure that they do have one. Two, to ensure that it's frequently engaged with, and then three, like, do those individuals on their group have the capabilities that when they do have an opportunity to voice up or to be at a board table or whatever, that they can manage those conversations. So right now, we're sort of jumping into sports that have reached out, or that we can connect with, to say, one, yep, do you have an athlete voice mechanism? Two, is it effective? And three, like, how can we support it in terms of getting it going? Some of these things, it might be, like you say, might be as simple as just that engagement piece, to ensure that, it's one thing to say, yeah, we want athlete voice. Okay, well then, when we've got some questions, or when stakeholders want to hear, let's hear it. And like I said, it's tough. And I know athlete, put my athlete hat back on. Athlete's got a lot going on, and sometimes, when you get an email or you get an opportunity, like, they might not check it, or they think, oh, I'll do that later, and they forget. But I think for us, it's really, like, in particular, moving forward for the next 2 years, are really going to try and put a bit of heat on, the sports, to make sure, one, they are engaged, and two, that there's that, frequency of engagement, just to keep them ticking over, rather than, I think, there'll be a few sports out there where their athlete voice mechanisms, or groups, would only really be engaged when there's a crisis, when there's something wrong. And then all of a sudden, you've got a sport talking to a bunch of athletes who haven't been engaged with at all through the year, but now they'll be hit with, okay, we've got this problem. What do you reckon? So not ideal. So we're just, trying to, like I say, just offer some support, around building capabilities. So when there are conversations, or if athletes want to raise concerns, they can do that internally, and hopefully between them and the sport, be in a good position to facilitate.
Yeah, there's a piece there that's building capabilities, and there's a piece there that's building identity of, I am someone who speaks up. I am someone who takes ownership of this, my role in this relationship. And if I come back to your team in Hyderabad and the brave culture that you were talking about, and in my work, one of the things I see often is what you just described, where we don't have the conversations about how we want to show up together until it's gone haywire. Yep. Until it's gone sideways. And one of the invitations that I'm kind of constantly making is, can we step back a couple of levels of abstraction before we talk about this particular thing that's going wrong? Have we had an initial conversation about how we want to show up together? And I'm tying this back to the conversation we were just having about how do you go about building that kind of player-led culture? What kind of, when you think about that brave framework, or even the superheroes theme, what kind of explicit conversations did you have with the team to go, you tell me how you want to take ownership of this and what you're going to do in order to turn this thing into something real? Do you have those conversations? How do they go?
Yeah, that was probably it. So off the back of me having, we basically, just for context, we had 3 tiers. So when we were selecting players, we had 5 international players from the World Series circuit, and then you had what they called 3 bridge players, which is basically from the next tier of the series, and then the local Indian players. And so I guess for that connection piece, I was always, in the back of my mind, there was always going to have to be a captain. And so through that process, I knew that I needed to bridge what potentially you would look at as the gaps, but we treated everyone as equals, as you say. So I wanted to have an individual from each of the tiers as co-captains. So basically ended up having a captain with two co-captains, but covered the three different categories. And that was, one, obviously to share the load, but two, to make sure that there was connection and that everyone felt like, okay, now this is our team. It's not the captain, and we do exactly what. So those individuals I tasked them with leading their own categories in terms of like sort of units, which would be like in different silos in the corporate world. You have your pockets of the different working groups of the organization. So that was to make sure that they were driving those different units. And then basically created a leadership group of that. So those three captains or three leaders plus two others, which were basically the generals on the field. So I had three sort of leaders that were leading, I guess, the holistic kind of approach and, culture and everything else, along with sort of the two generals that were going to be the leaders typically on the field. And then we had our own separate chat from the team chat. And basically when I was, putting together the daily plan for each training, I would, send it through to the leadership group to say, this is what I've got in mind. What do you guys think? And I didn't start that process until the second round robin. So, I guess there's that fine line between, how much leash do we give in terms of running the ship, and then obviously how much responsibility is too much responsibility until the time's right. So it was good to go through that first round robin. I was doing the trainings so the boys could just turn up, put on their boots, get into it. There was no everything was streamlined and they didn't have to think too much. And then obviously that second week where I knew I was going to be dealing with some tired bodies, people have been away from home now for 3 weeks. There was going to be a little bit of mental well-being to deal with, along with many other things. So through that, we were able to sort of navigate a lot of conversations. If the training schedule looked a bit too much, or if the players thought we needed a little bit more of something else, then we would go there. And that was a genuine approach in terms of the players leading, the team. And so I even had them, say on one of the training days that would, cut the training and just go out for a beer and just hang out. And we did that. Whereas I know, if I was 10 years, 15 years ago under a different coach or a different environment, that would never happen. So, it was really.
Did you have a bit of a sink in your tummy? Like same as you look at your daughter and you're like, if we'd been training for longer, like, did you have a thing of like, oh, really go like, because I think of the fear a lot of people have. For me as a leader, I'm subject to this. The fear is like, well, what if we say player led and the players are like, great, let's skip training and drink beer. Like, like how do you deal with that?
Yeah, and I think there's always going to be there's always a fine line, and the only approach I can really put down is like, if you're going to put up too many boundaries, the team is going to rebel either way. And so if you think, or you hope you've done enough in terms of building that culture, that if you give them some slack, you'd hope that they'll manage that appropriately. I mean, I don't know what happened on the couple of nights that we went out, but in terms of turning up for training and everything the next day, the boys were fine, and I guess it's easy to kind of look back, but that's always going to be in the back of, I think, any leader or any coach's mind. But you would hope that you've done the groundwork where if the players care about the team, and they know that the coach is giving them an opportunity to let their hair down and relax a little bit, that they won't blow that opportunity by being silly. Whereas you could imagine if I was running a tight ship and they hadn't been out, and then all of a sudden they've got this opportunity to let loose, I'm pretty sure it could have been a different dynamic. So I think just getting a real appreciation for that and managing that is key.
You mentioned with this team this idea of them playing for something bigger than themselves, of playing for this new league in India, of playing for future generations of sevens players. You've been quite open about the role of your faith in your own journey. How does that influence you? How did you bring that into your work? What does it mean for you? There's not a very specific question there. Can you just talk to me generally about your faith?
I do that, yeah. Like bringing the group together was always going to be tough, and yeah, like you say, like I'm proud to be Christian, and it was quite funny over time. There were a group of the boys, that would kneel down after a game and say their prayers and things like that. But I definitely wanted to, I guess, kind of remind everyone that there's always something bigger than them. They're not, no one's bigger than the game. And so I guess, yeah, like you say, the getting an understanding of, ultimately what that competition is trying to do for the wider, India population, but also like just trying to find ways to give those local Indian boys their flowers in terms of like, some of them were just happy to be in the room with like these international players. So really trying to let these international players in particular know that, for some of these local Indian boys, this is the highlight. This is as good as it gets for them. And I guess vice versa with these Indian boys, letting them know that they can mix it with the best in the world, and rather than the gap between, like I say, the categories, what they were called the marquee players, then the bridge players and the local Indians, really trying to draw down that, we were one team, because there were a couple Indians in particular, and one that was, the MVP for the whole tournament, from our team, and he was a star for us, and he was like the pin-up boy for India after those tournaments, and everyone was talking about him. But it was good for him to be seen, in that space as an equal, as well as the international players making sure that they knew that they weren't any better humans than the others. And so that was a really important piece, for my coaching. And there was what I did was what I called the hero of the day. So I knew that there was always going to be, typically the marquee players that were either going to be scoring some, fancy tries and getting all the claps and stuff from, the fans in the crowd. But I wanted to make sure that I had a way to acknowledge others in the team. And so the hero of the day would be a jersey presentation to who I thought was the hero of the game, regardless of who the commentators, and because there was obviously an official player of each game. So I always made sure that there was an opportunity there to acknowledge, players in our team for other reasons than, if they scored the best try or made the biggest tackle and things like that. And I think that was a way of sort of just reminding them that that were one team, and that, there's always something bigger or, better outside of the game.
I'm hearing you acknowledging them for how they showed up.
Yeah.
Which is really the only thing in our control.
100%. And, a lot of them, like I say, and I could tell the nerves were there, at the very first game. And, they're looking at these international players that they would have only seen on TV, at the highest level. And now they've got a chance to, to rub shoulders and to pass the ball to them and to hang out with them. And so, for a lot of them, it was just trying to, I guess, bring them back down to ground level to say, hey, at the end of the day, we've still got to play rugby, and you guys are here as rugby players, so let's focus on that.
We come back to this question of identity. I'm hearing these Indian players going, oh my gosh, am I sharing the field with these idols of mine or these legends? Is this really who I am? Am I someone who does this? And I heard you describe elsewhere, Titch seeing in you the potential to captain your nation, and that you went through a process of kind of leaning into that. These are identities that we form for ourselves. Do you remember what it was like? And the thing that I'm envisioning is someone tells me I've got the potential to captain the nation, and I go, my first reaction is like, that's ridiculous. That's something people in books do, or people I see on TV do. That's not something for me. And then this process of going, actually, how do I take that from something I heard that sounds ridiculous to something I heard that, okay, well, maybe he believes it, to something that maybe I could possibly do that, to something that actually settles in my bones as this is who I am. This is who I have the potential to be. Do you remember that process for you of like growing into this person who is this dominant sevens captain for New Zealand?
Yeah, so it definitely was a long process. I remember when Titch, gave me the call to come into his room and talk about something. And he obviously mentioned that he's keen for me to captain the team for the year. This was back in like 2006, and I had only been in the team for not that long, so I was kind of blown away. One, that he obviously picked me, but two, that he thought that there was something in me that um, could lead the team, because I watched and I knew all the captains before me, and they were some of them were my idols growing up. So I think it was a process that I had to go through, and then like you say, it probably settled in me, I guess, as a position maybe after sort of a year and a bit, because that very first year when I was in the team, we struggled as a team. We were just, like I say, when new kids on the block, and then we started finding our feet, and then create a little bit of dominance along the way. But I think through that process, it was me trying to, I guess, learn how I was going to lead, and then learn what was kind of my style of leadership. And then I think through that process of sort of figuring out that identity piece around how I was going to captain, and what was going to work for me as a captain, then I kind of started embracing it a little bit more, because I know typically you sort of go into those spaces where you try and emulate the last captain or the previous, or an inspirational captain out there. So it was really about trying to find my feet along the way. And I think, like you say, when I kind of found that process, or I went through that process and found kind of that sweet spot in terms of how I was going to lead, then I've become a lot more confident, a lot more comfortable in that role, and then started sort of going about my way, and then sort of trying to I guess put my own kind of touch on the team itself, along with the other leaders.
This is something that's so consistent that comes through. And you mentioned before about the All Blacks trying to do things like previous teams. And I, again, have heard this so many times, this thing of actually our work, we can be inspired by everyone who came before, but our work is to be awake to this moment and to this person in front of me and to this call that I have to express myself in the way that only I can express myself in this context.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think bringing your your own self, your true identity into the environment, like bringing a piece of you. You're there for a reason, and everyone's unique in their own way. So it's making sure that you're comfortable enough and confident enough. And I think it's a lot different now with the athletes, and like we say, that generation that's coming through. It is a lot different. Whereas you could probably back in the day, players were sort of going in, and you kind of knew what you're gonna get, or you knew what you're in for. Whereas these days, I think the spaces that are created out there are really sort of genuinely trying to one, encourage athletes to come in as their true self, but two, giving them a platform to, or a way to empower them to come in and to lead how they want, to play how they want, to show up how they want, along or aligned with what the team, I guess, holds in terms of the culture and the standards. But that's I think it's a little bit clearer now in terms of that approach, and what those athletes bring in terms of the dynamic that everyone's operating in today.
DJ, I know we're just about out of time. I have one final question for you. Who is Isaac Peach, and what did you learn from him beyond anything technical, tactical?
Oh, I mean, that was an interesting sort of phase I guess I went through in terms of an opportunity to do some boxing, some charity or silly boxing, whatever you want to call it. And I guess Isaac is he's a proud Westie, and and an awesome boxing coach. So I had an opportunity to spend a few weeks under his tutelage, preparing for a charity fight. And I'm pretty sure if you've spoken to him or to Mia, he wears his heart on the sleeve, and he's passionate not just about boxing and his fighters, but also for the sport of boxing and advocating, for the betterment of the sport. But yeah, I had some interesting sessions in this barn or in the shed, in this gym, punching bags and getting punched, beaten up for a few weeks in preparation. So yeah, I mean, it was at the back end, obviously, of my career, so not too long ago. So I was, 40, I think 42, stepping into the ring. But I think through that opportunity with obviously him, his wife, and all the other fighters there, was another, I think, avenue for me, in terms of how I sort of go about my life now, about challenging myself and stepping into the unknown. I think everyone knows on the other side of fair success, and I'm all about learning and growing in uncomfortable spaces. So that was definitely one of those opportunities. Not a fighter by any means, and on the field, I might be aggressive and get into the rugby stuff, but boxing, I think you definitely have to be wired a little bit differently to do that for a living. But definitely, yeah, learn a lot of things about myself. Enjoyed learning a new skill, but ultimately, there's not too many people who can say they've gone in the ring to do a fight, and so that was, again, a box that I could tick in terms of doing something outside my comfort zone, and for a great cause, and for some great learnings along the way. So it was an awesome experience, and enjoyed that time under his training, and I probably do need to go back there and pay my respects to him and the team.
I find it super. So I had Mia on the podcast, Mia Motsu, and I was a boxer, a competitive amateur boxer, and Mia and I shared an experience. The way she spoke about Isaac, I haven't met Isaac, but the way that she spoke about him really recalled to me my coach when I was fighting Dave Marks, who was just such a champion human. And for folks who don't box, one of the things that it was always really difficult to communicate was Dave Marks brought so much love into our relationship and made me feel so loved and cared for. And when I got into the ring, I was never angry in the ring. I was never like, I'm trying to hurt you. I'm in the ring going, this is my sport. This is my almost art. It sounds really wanky to say it that way, but and to me, the boxing piece and what I understand of Isaac Peach is, so when done in that way, embodies everything I'm trying to get at on this podcast, which is we can do super hard things. We can have super high ambition. We can have super hard goals. We can make ourselves really uncomfortable, push ourselves really hard, like do all the things outside our comfort zone, all the hard things in a way that brings our heart into it, and that we're showing up for each other and for ourselves with love and care. And that's what lights me up.
Oh, I mean, yeah, especially with me, and I've heard her talk about him as well. Like, yeah, he's done worlds for her, and I know that their relationship that they share is definitely a tight one, and wrapped around a lot of love. And I've heard her, how passionate she is about what Isaac and his family has done for her. So can definitely understand what you're saying there. And yeah, and I totally get it. I think probably even more so now, on the other side of ambition is like I say, that empathy piece. And I know now when I go and chase goals and when I chase things, if my heart's not in it, I can't do it anymore. Whereas, like when I was chasing that rugby ball around for a living, regardless of whatever was coming at me, I'll keep chasing that rugby ball, and so you're definitely navigating that space now, with the, things that I'm trying to achieve and goals that I'm going after. I need to be, a lot more empathetic about how I go about it. And that definitely keeps me connected, keeps me chasing. Whereas, yeah, if I'm just, like, you say wildly ambitious, it's not going to get me there these days, for sure.
Well, but this is what I will say to you, is that the way I hear you describing the team in India, and the way I hear you describing the different kinds of players you've got, and your attentiveness to their needs and how you want them to feel and what you want them to understand and how you're inviting them in to see themselves as potentially capable of more than what they had imagined for themselves. What I am seeing and hearing from you is that you're showing up to that mahi with a massive amount of love for your players. And I have no doubt that they benefit tremendously from that.
I appreciate that.
DJ, it's been such a delight to chat with you. We are at the end of our time together, but I have learned so much from this conversation. I've so appreciated you taking the time to talk with me. Thank you for joining me on the pod.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening. What a humble, dedicated man. I can see why he was so effective as a leader. He would really just get the job done, I imagine, with no ego, that he would absolutely uplift the folks around him. And I love the way he is approaching his coaching career. What an extraordinary opportunity for those young Indian players. I love it. A huge thanks to Celebrity Speakers and Zed for supporting this episode. If you want to book DJ for a keynote and bring your audience his special brand of leadership, Celebrity Speakers are the ones to reach out to. Thanks again for listening. As always, please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me on hello@kylacolbin.com. And of course, like, subscribe, follow. I am always grateful for your offerings to the algorithm gods. See you next week. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Read. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week, high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Sunil Unka, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.